Namaste. Happy almost Memorial Day.
Happy sad day.
Yeah. Well, you know, if you were, all I'll say about Memorial Day is that if we really wanted to do something to honor those who had served and those who have fallen, we would stop having parades that display military might and make it appealing to young people, especially socioeconomically disadvantaged young people, to sign up and volunteer so that they could be celebrated at next year's Memorial Day parade. And instead, maybe we would call on the politicians who glorify themselves during those parades to stop cutting aid to veterans, stop cutting funding to the VA, stop believing that taking care of the people we send to war isn't as big a priority as, bigger actually, than sending them. And then maybe there would be some congruence there and a reason to have a parade, but that won't happen in my lifetime, so. But I always like, you know, coming down to watch the phallic objects dragged down the street. You know, the missiles and the tanks. I mean, it's amazing to me that you look at those types of Memorial Day-ish military parades across cultures. All the phallic stuff comes out. There's a moral in that story.
Which is?
If we stop letting those with phallic things make the decisions, we wouldn't need to parade them about. Anyway.
That's a really good point.
No, I'm just saying.
Anyway.
So, I've been telling you that I've been reading this book and that I'm still not done with it by Gabor, because the reason I'm not done with it is it has a lot of big words in it. And a lot of big words that are medical big words, I don't know what they mean. And so I have to sit there and think and go look them up. And then it seems that medicine has been invaded by influences from Sanskrit and German, where when you want to make a new word, you just keep adding words onto the one you have. And so you get things like psychoneuroimmunoendocrinology. Yeah.
It sounds like a sentence from Paul.
Yeah, it does. You know, or if you ever look at these Indian words that just like
Like Swami Satchidananda?
yeah, and you can pull them apart and figure out what they mean if you know what the little pieces mean.
What book are you reading?
It's a book by Gabor Mate, who's that's where the first reading was from him.
Oh.
It's called something that I'll remember in a minute. But basically, his theory is that we don't integrate our emotions, and that suppresses our immune system and causes chronic illness. And I thought it was especially interesting in light of all of these healing stories from Jesus. Because I think we've come to the point where we have to say that once again, science climbed over the mountain and looked over to the other side and found spirituality sitting there saying, yeah, we knew this shit already. Pardon me, this stuff already. Because, not so much in the centurion servant story, but a little bit. But in a lot of the other Jesus healing stories, what really...
I mean, living example.
Oh, okay. There you go. What seems to happen is that Jesus does something that shouldn't cure anybody. I mean, because it's so simple. He might spit in a little mud and rub it in your eyes or your ears, which should hurt, right? But you see, and what I'm impressed with is that very often it has to do with touching. I mean, there may be a pretext for touching, like getting together some spit or some dirt or whatever, but it's touching. And one of the things Gabor says is that if you take two people who have the same traumatic thing happen to them, say they witness a horrific car accident, and you sit one of the guys over there and one of the guys over there, and you start to measure their stress hormones, which is what represses your immune system. And then you send another guy over to this guy sitting over here, and you say, and that person says to him, hey, that must have been really hard to see. Would you like to tell me about it? And it doesn't even matter if he tells him about it or not, his stress hormones drop. Because now he knows somebody cares, he has somewhere to go with that trauma. I mean, it's a whole bunch of things. Anger, sadness. Which brings me to this. The little picture here is from a movie called Inside Out.
Good movie.
Yeah, if you haven't seen Inside Out, it's on Netflix, you should see Inside Out. The premise is that Joy, who is, of course, looking joyful, she's not being held up, arms are up in the air. Sadness is the blue person on the bottom right. Anger, played by Lewis Black, which is great, is the red guy with his head on fire. Fear is the purple guy, and the green girl is disgust. Disgust, yeah, like revolt.
She's grossed up by everything.
Yeah, she's the queasy stomach. And in the beginning of the movie, one of the interesting things that happens is Joy, what their job is, they're all inside the head of the main character, and they're all inside everybody's head, these feelings. Joy draws a chalk circle on the floor and tells Sadness, go stand in that circle and don't leave it. Because when you go near the control panel, it makes, I forget the character's name, the little girl there in her head, she gets sad, and that's not good. We don't want her to get sad. Which is kind of like anger. Because those of us who come out of, say, more or less European traditions, with German influence or thereabouts, my family showed affection by giving each other a crisp salute in the morning, and if we really got carried away, we clicked our heels. and you
I need some clean.
oh, wait. Sure. And there's more of them. That one's the one. There's more. And so we weren't trained to express this stuff. We weren't even told it was okay. And then you look at all of this illness. And I want to say, and Gabor, because of Gabor Mate says it, could be ADHD, could be why we're dealing with so much autism. He definitely believes it's behind chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, which I sometimes call fibromyalgia because when Tori was little she couldn't pronounce it, so she called it fibromyalgia.
Like that.
And all of these processes. And so, your doctor doesn't talk about that. My doctor doesn't talk about that. I go to my doctor, she says, here's what we have to do. But doesn't have the time in her schedule to take the time to look at what goes on in the patient's life that could be contributing to the condition.
You need to switch to my
So, we'll see. So what you get is then the doctor treats the condition with a pill,
Right.
which will help the condition in all likelihood, but it's not taking away the cause. Because it's not letting all the players come to the fore. And so Jesus, on the other hand, comes on the woman with an issue of blood. It's a chronic health condition. What does he do? Well, she does it actually. She touches his robe. But he doesn't say, get away from me. He accepts her, and the bleeding stops. Gabor Mate talks about this cycle of the chronic stress related to repressing emotions as being a primary cause of menstrual difficulties. Gee, what a surprise then that Jesus could acknowledge this woman and her problem clears up.
In a culture that having her problem would cause her to be ostracized by someone.
Yeah, and ritually unclean, and so there was additional shame on there that she had nowhere to process and nowhere to take it. And so it just builds and grows and it becomes this cycle. So, of course, the problem, or the solution rather, isn't to just blah with everything we feel. Just throw it out there. In the 80s and early 90s, there was a big movement in psychiatry, that anger really ought to be expressed. And they had these things called batakas. And they were big foam bats. And they would take people down to the gym in cycling to
Battle of their demons.
yes, beat the hell out of each other with a foam bat. And in my experience, I wasn't working in the field then, but I was visiting people that were in the hospital. When they came back, they were just more pissed off than they were when they left. They were now violently disinhibited, angry people.
Oh.
And it never seemed to tap the well until it went dry. And Buddhism would tell you the reason it didn't tap the well till it went dry is because you cannot tap the well until it goes dry. That in fact, if you take your foam bat down and beat the crap out of something, you're feeding the anger. And it's just going to grow. And what you need to do is embrace the anger and say it's okay. In the case of this movie, what they learned, not with anger so much, but with sadness. And I think I should be clear, rejecting any of this will do this. It's just that our culture rejects anger more than anything else, but we're not so fond of sadness either. Or fear. But if you draw the circle, and you put sadness in the circle, and you don't let it out, you're not embracing sadness. Embracing sadness is saying, yes, there's times where it's good to be sad. Look at people who suffer a great loss and refuse to let themselves grieve it. How that continues to eat at them, and you know what that does? That makes stress hormones get released, which repress their immune system. Look at people who get angry, and instead of raging, hopefully they get to the place where they say, you know, this really upsets me, I'm really quite angry about this. That's all it takes. Or you get a meal slid under your nose and you go, oh my God, what's in there? Instead of sucking it up, stuffing the disgust and saying, I'll eat those things that look like earthworms, you might say, you know, this really isn't very appealing to me and I don't want to hurt your feelings, but I think I'll take a pass. Now that one's easier for us to deal with. we seem to get rid of the food and there's the stomach thing that goes with it.
I know I shouldn't have brought that with rum cake today.
Yeah, the whole Klingon, if you ever are a Star Trek fan, I think the whole Klingon dietary experience in those shows was designed by somebody who really understood revulsion and disgust. People are eating things that move. It makes oysters seem like pretty benign.
With anger, do you need to express it to the person that you're angry at, or can you
Not
just?
necessarily.
Oh, okay. Can you just express it to?
Yeah, especially if they're gone. There's people we're angry at who maybe they moved across the country, maybe they're dead, maybe we don't know where they are, maybe we can't talk to them. We can write a letter that never gets sent. We can do a bunch of things, but it's the internalizing it that gets to us. And as my best piece of evidence, I offer you my back and the book that I read by the doctor named John Sarno, which said it's called the Mind-Body Prescription. That one I remember. And it said essentially that when we have subconscious anger, our body will try to take our mind, and I have a copy of that for you, Peg. Our body will try to take our mind off our anger by causing us physical pain. How does it do it? Well, by oxygen depletions, but it causes inflammation and spasm, which is a function of the stress hormone. The whole cortisol thing. Yeah, cortisol is a good thing when we need to act, when we're in danger, when we're crossing the street and we look up and we say, oh, look, there's a bus 10 feet away. You know, cortisol, adrenaline, those things are good when we're in real danger. The problem is when we don't dispose of our emotions or handle them properly, our body believes we're in danger. It impacts us like we're in danger, and we start to pay a health price for it because none of those substances were intended to be secreted all the time. And so in this light, to bring it, I think that first of all as it sits is a huge spiritual thing. Because I think physical and psychological health is essential to spirituality. But doesn't it shed light on the great healers? Because what did they do? They said, hey buddy, I'm sorry you saw that accident. It must have been terrible. Would you like to talk about it? They said, or reacted, when somebody came close, who they were supposed to reject. And rejection, again, makes people either sad or angry or both. And if they can't touch it and can't process it, it's going to make them sick. So the woman touches the hem of Jesus' robe and she's made well. Because he doesn't go, he doesn't let his disgust come out and go, ew, unclean, right? But instead, he has compassion for her. And there's story after story. And in the case of the centurion, I mean, there's really interesting things going on there because the centurion building the synagogue for the Jewish people, that wouldn't have exactly been clean. In fact, historically, synagogues didn't develop until after the fall of the temple. So, did this happen exactly this way? Well, no. But it's meant to tell a story that here we have these crossings of lines. And the centurion who's tried to do good things, but he's still really wondering, am I okay? And he comes to Jesus and says, you know, you can heal my servant. And doesn't need to see it. And I'd suggest it's because what he really needs to hear is that Jesus cares. And that his uncertainty and his struggle with, am I okay? Am I clean or unclean? Do these people like me? Is what I'm doing the right thing to do in terms of being an occupying force? All of this stuff. What he needs is, yeah, you're all right. It's okay. And it's probably what his servant needs too. And what Jesus did probably equipped the centurion to go back and be the agent of healing for his servant. So it's not miraculous at all, nor does the development of science disprove it. In fact, quite the contrary. It turns out that it's very explainable using science, which makes it no less splendid and wonderful and amazing because everybody and their brother is obviously not running around doing this for people or we'd be a lot healthier than we are. But if you haven't seen the movie or even if you have, see it again. Because we need all of it. None of it is bad. And we can't afford to repress it any longer. Amen.